Hey Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, Andy. How are you, mate?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How's
Good.
you? I talked to you a couple months ago. How have you been doing in the UK right now with everything COVID? Getting by?
Yeah, just about. You've got to can only play the cards you dealt. So we've
Yeah,
been, getting on okay with it, and of course, getting the new album underway and all of that stuff. So it's been interesting times, if nothing else.
yeah. So yeah, it absolutely has. It's been weird times. Um, congrats on the album.
Thank
Uh,
you.
it's great to hear new Yes music. It's been a bit of a spell since the last one. Um, so I wanted to get into it, and I wanted to ask you. So the last time I talked to you, it was about Halcyon Hymns, and it was a Dance Great Association album, and I know that you guys record remotely when you've done those albums, and so with the Quest, this is the first time Yes has done this sort of remote work, and I'm wondering how similar was it to work on a Yes album, or how different it was versus a DBA album.
Well, I think the principle's the same, and certainly having had a lot of experience of working with Chris that way for the last 10 years,
Yeah,
it didn't seem that much of a shift for me, and so I was kind of used to working that way. In fact, generally speaking, a lot of the way that things are done this way is done this way. It's done through file exchange and all that sort of stuff. So it was not particularly difficult for me. I think maybe it's a different way of working for someone like Steve, for instance, who'd probably never done anything like that, and maybe Alan, but certainly. It was not something that was unusual to us. So, in many ways, it was. We had all the ideas really well and truly prepared, I think, before the pandemic hit. So we were kind of in fairly good shape in terms of how we saw the whole thing eking out. So it was not that difficult, really, to be honest.
when so as you said, some of the ideas, or maybe many of the ideas, were sort of gestating before the pandemic. So I'm thinking 2019. What's the discussion like within the band because about recording new music? Because as you know, there's always this anticipation, certainly from the fan base, of, we want to hear new Yes music. I think more so than a lot of of bands that have been around a lot. There's this real need from the fans to hear what can a lineup do. So when did the discussion start, and was there any sort of you know theme or plan?
Well, I think that the fact that we've been together now with this lineup nearly 6 years. There have been talks quite along the way that we should really think about doing an album, and we very kind of tuned into each other, and I think that it was very important that we actually said one day, look, let's do an album. So we started talking about ideas and putting these things together, and as I say, it was all fairly much loosely in a framework before we got involved with the whole pandemic thing. So
Right.
I don't imagine it would have been strategically that much different even had we not had the pandemic, because I think that with half the band over in California or on the West Coast and half the band in the UK, it's a way that we had to it was a natural way of working in many respects.
Right. There's a couple of songs that I want to
Yeah,
dive into, but before I do that, this is your fourth Yes studio album, and
yeah.
it's three in the past 10 years, and then Drama back in 1980. And I'm wondering how have how have you changed as a player or as a songwriter in the context of Yes, from way back in 1980 through the work that you've done on these last three the albums, or have you changed at all?
Well, I think it depends on who's in the band and who you're writing for, and certainly a lot of the ideas for the Dharma album came from stuff that Trevor and myself have been working on. So that was a different area, and I think that certainly the last two albums, that my contributions in terms of the writing have been very much me working with John,
Yeah.
and putting that sort of. So it's always going to come out different depending on who you're writing partners with. As as was the case when I was working a lot with John Wetton. We had a different type of songs, I think. So I tend to try and adapt to whoever I'm working with at any given moment. So the other thing with Yes is, of course, you have to be conscious of the fact that you're writing for, different musicians that you've got a different rhythm section, so you've got to think about that. You've got to think about if you've got a basic song idea, how well that's going to translate into Yes music. So it's a constant juggling process, really, to see what you can come up with.
Um, One of the things that I love on the album, I think it's for lack of a better term, I think it's just so kick ass. Is the great ending jam between you and Steve on the ice bridge, which to me is it's really really phenomenal, and it's so exciting. And I wanted to ask about how that specific part of the song came about. Was it a discussion that between the musicians that we should have sort of like an extended extra? I'm really curious about the development because I love hearing you and Steve play off each other. It's a very classic Yes vibe.
I think that's right, and I think that something that Steve and myself had talked about, particularly in recent years, saying, look, we've got to do something that's very much, two, featuring you and me, how we can work together. Because I think on previous albums we never really had that kind of dueling guitar and keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
like it happens over the back part of the ice bridge. So it was a very interesting thing to actually tackle that because, as I say, we'd never, Steve and myself have done so many albums together in the past, but we never actually had that kind of exchange of an interplay. So it was a great thing, and I think that I'm hoping that there's going to be more of that to come in the future because it is it's very exciting and very refreshing, and I think that the fans really, particularly as you pointed out, the fans really get off on that, on that interplay.
Yeah, it's so great. How does that how does that come about when you're recording remotely? Is it a call and response to like I don't know how how easy it is to explain the logistics of it, but to me, I'm wondering if you could try because it's really spectacular.
Well, I think that Steve was doing most of the production with the engineer Curtis, so he he had all the files in front of him, and he sent me some stuff, some guitar chops I'm doing here. Do you fancy exchanging the ideas? So I was firing stuff back to him, uh, to try and complement what he'd already put down. And said, there's an open space, there's another open space, there's another open space. So do your bit, do your bit. So that's what I did, and I
Yeah.
sent the ideas through, and he was really thrilled with the way it turned out.
I wanted to ask you about the orchestration on the album. We hear it first on the Ice Bridge, and there's the orchestra plays a pretty big
Yeah.
part throughout the quest. Um, and so my first question about that is, which came first? Was it the songs and the notion of including an orchestra, or was it like how did an orchestra come to be a part of this album?
Well, I wouldn't say it was an afterthought. It was something that was bubbling under. I think Steve had mentioned before that he was in touch with this orchestra. I think he'd used them on some of his solo stuff previously. And he was very, I think the nature of this album is very much it features acoustic instruments, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that. Uh, so it was a natural development, I think, of that. There's a lot of acoustic piano on the album. There's a lot of acoustic guitar. Uh, it's a very makes it a very kind of almost a sort of urbane uh, feeling that Yes has gone back to its roots in some ways. And so, if you go back to say Time and a Word, where there's an
Mm-hmm.
orchestra flying on Time and a Word, uh, albeit that's a big feature on no opportunity necessary. But
Yeah.
um, I think that the key thing is for me was that you know that having that orchestral feeling of the music already enhanced and really pointed towards maybe having these other acoustic sections that were played by an orchestra. So it kind of all works together, you know. I mean, I play a lot of Hammond organ on the album.
Yeah.
Um, I play a lot of electric piano. So they're very early instruments, if you like, that Yes used. Tony Kaye, you know, that was pretty much all he had.
I talked to
Yeah,
Tony not long ago, and I said to him, I said to him, I said, I met him on the 50th tour, and I got to tell him
yeah.
that he was my favorite Yes keyboardist of all time, sitting next to my second favorite keyboardist in Yes of all time, because he was right beside you.
That's
And
great. You know, I think
what he said to me, he says he doesn't get to hear that very often. It's normally the guy in the cape that gets the favorite Yes keyboard keyboard kudos.
yeah, I mean, I had some great times with Tony, and I told him on the tour when he first joined us for these dates. It's such a great guy. But I told him, I said that when I was studying for my A levels at school, um, Time and a Word was on my turntable non-stop, and
Wow.
I was really inspired by that gritty Hammond and some of his nice piano playing and stuff like that. So I think that was the one thing that really got me into Yes in the first place. I mean, of course, you know, Rick was a incredible addition and took them in a whole new direction, and of course Patrick on the Relay album was incredible. So I mean, it all started with Tony, and I think
Yeah.
that's a great thing, you know.
Uh,
And so and he's a really lovely guy as well, which is great too.
yeah. I wanted to one more thing I wanted to ask about the inclusion of the orchestra, and I'm curious from you as a player, does it? I feel like you on this album in particular, you do a great job. You have moments where you really shine, but you also play support as well. And a lot of times, I think that is it's supporting the orchestra. When that comes in, do you feel at all like I could be doing this, like I could be doing this part, or is it something where it's like let's hear how it sounds? And I've always thought of you as a player that is pretty ego free. Like you want to do what's best for the music. But I'm curious about that idea of the orchestra. If it's something where for me you're like, well, maybe I could do that, or it's all cool for you.
Well, I think it's as I said, it's different really having an orchestra. You know, it's I mean, I've got some. You know, I'm a very orchestral player in
Yes.
terms of a keyboard player. You know, Ice Bridge, there's some virtuoso playing on that, but you know, it's not my general leaning. I'm more the orchestrator, the sound guy. You know, I
Yeah.
come up with these soundscapes and the layers of keyboards that I became well known for. So my whole thing is that I'm more when I look at the orchestra, I don't see it as a me versus them, you know, because
Right.
I've got, as I say, I've got some great orchestral sounds under my fingertips, but um, it's I think it's an addition, you know, and I think it's something that in this case, I'm not saying it would be the on any future albums per se, but I'm saying in this case with this particular album, I think it's very very appropriate that it's on there, and I think it really enhances the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really does. Let me ask you about a living island. It ends the proper album. They're the three tracks afterwards. But a living island, it ends with a real sense of optimism, which is very much a part of what I think makes Yes Yes. Considering the difficulties of the world that we're in right now, was it difficult to come up with something so positive and uplifting?
I think that the ideas were, they've been around for a while, and certainly the end section for that was. I think it was a grandiose theme that I've been working on for some time. In fact, there's a little snippet of it on the beginning of the DBA album. That uh, you know, I felt that with the band like Yes, you'd really could really make this just go bigger and bigger. And as a finale to the album, I think it finishes the album on a big Yes are known for these big major chords. You've got
Yes.
something like And You and I. Yes, the only way that real bands like Yes could do, really, they take, Awaken, something like that, is a sort of spiritual experience almost for the listener. And so that's really what I was trying to achieve with that, is that you get that big, majestic chord sequence coming out, and I think it's a great way to finish the album.
Yeah, it is. It is. It ends it. It really does end it on such a positive note. Are there any songs in particular you're looking forward to playing live once we're able to once you're able to play live and once I'm able to go to concerts again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very varied album, and I think that certainly, some of the more delicate tracks on there will make really, a very, I mean, some of Yes's more powerful, big fanfare type songs,
Yes.
like Parallels or something like that, is to put one of these songs in there after it, and I think it's gonna, in a way that we did with, say, I suppose Madrigal from Tomato, that Steve and Billy and John did.
Yes.
It's a nice little release from some of the great full blown Yes sounds, and I think that. I'm not saying we're going to do a lot. I mean, it'd be nice to open with, I don't know, something like the Ice Bridge, which has got a big, powerful entry. But I certainly think that we'll have a look and see, how many of these songs we're going to put into it. We're not going to play the whole album, and there's nothing worse than trying to turn people on to an entire album in a live
Right.
setting when they come to see, you know, they come to see you play Yes's big hits. I mean,
Yeah.
that's without putting too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
I think that. You've got to be prepared to be able to play those things, because otherwise, people will go home and go, well, hell, man, I didn't know anything about that. I couldn't. What they doing? They're playing this whole album that I haven't even heard yet. So it's a balance, I think, with how you put a show together.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed this, Geoff, but Yes fans can be very prickly. I don't
Oh,
know.
tell me about it. Yeah, I've had it firsthand.
I know.
Double barrels. Yeah, yeah.
I, well, look, I'm going to put my vote for you. You guys should start the every show with the ice break, because that is a killer way to start a show. And I think that regardless if it's new or not, it would start things off on an amazing note. But that's just me. Um, Finally, this is your 10-year anniversary straight in being in Yes, and I want to take Relayer out of the mix because I know you guys are going to be playing that album in its entirety when hopefully in the new year. So tell me, is there any song at this point in the catalog that you haven't played live that you would love to be able to perform at some point?
Yeah, what, that I haven't played already?
That you haven't played already, like one song from the
Yeah.
catalog that you'd love to do.
Um, I tell you what, I'd be quite interested in Mind Drive.
Yeah, that's a great choice. That's a great choice.
Yeah, it would be a great song to tackle, I think, that one.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for congrats on the new album. Thank you for making a new Yes album. It's great to hear, and it's always wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks, Andy. Great to catch up again, and hopefully speak soon.